for joining us for today's session. So we're on our 6th session for this semester, and we are continuing our series on hello. So we are continuing with our study into the study guide or the study units. Yes, I'm just going to give us 3 more minutes to see if anyone else joins us. In the meantime, yes. Okay. In the meantime, Bronwyn has posted the attendance register. If you guys can please just sign that as per usual, and then we'll get started shortly. Okay, so I think we'll get started. Sorry for the delay. I just took the opportunity to also just go get myself some water. Yeah, I hope you guys are doing well and that it's been a good Monday so far. I really appreciate that the weather is really starting to turn around for us. So it looks like we're really getting into the heart of summer. So that's very exciting. Let me just share my screen so we can get started. Okay. Is everyone able to share my screen? To see my screen, rather. And can everyone hear me? Can I get some indication that you guys can hear me if I start? Thank you, Amy. All right. Okay, so for those of you who have just joined us for the first time, welcome. And for everyone who has been joining us, welcome back. It's so good to have everyone back again. And like I said, this is our 6th session. And yeah, I think it's going really well, and I hope you guys are finding these very valuable and useful for your studies. So just for the benefit of those who are new, I'd ask that we please, as we come in, just make sure that our mics and cameras are switched off. And that if you do want to participate, of course, this space is very open and welcoming, and I would want you guys to participate as much as you want to. So whenever you want to do that, please feel free to just use the chat box or raise the hand icon, and then I will acknowledge you, and then you can unmute your mic and ask a question or just give a comment. And yeah, I really will encourage you guys to make use of that, so that it's not just me speaking. After a few of these sessions, I come to just realize that, yeah, I don't really like hearing my own voice for a solid 2 hours. So I welcome all comments and questions during this session. I also just want to remind you that we do have our one-on-one consultations still available. And you would have received an email, I know I did, an email about those and the process and how to go about that. If you have any questions around that process, you're welcome to email CT and Tut, and then they will direct you accordingly. So yes, as I've said, and as Bronwyn has also helped us with the attendance register. Thank you, Bronwyn. You guys, please just remember to fill that in. And at the end of the session, or closer to the end of the session, if you could fill in the evaluation form, so that we know that these are helpful for you and that we are really supporting you where you guys need the support. And if you do want to do some sort of revision, these sessions are all recorded and available on the My Life site. So that is also there for your convenience. Okay, so last week we started our series, or our walk. I was thinking of calling it something very interesting, but finding names for things have never been my greatest strength. I'm not very creative in that space. I was like, okay, it's just our walk through the study guide. I think that's the best I could do. So we started with Unit 1 last week. And yeah, Unit 1 really looked at the strategies of discovery. We were introduced to the concept of science and research, what it means, why it is relevant, what it does. And then we looked at various elements within research and in the social sciences. And we also, I think what was really nice is we were able to see that research is not something that happens out there, but something that we are constantly a part of. Scientific research then is when we go in and are a bit more systematic in our search for answers, right? A bit more systematic in our inquiry. So that's that's just an introduction to Unit 1. And then we looked at sources of general knowledge, where we said that there are different ways in which we acquire knowledge. And we really wanted to highlight these to show that everyone is coming from a space where they have acquired certain knowledge, and that can then play into the research that we end up doing. So I want to hear from you guys what the sources of general knowledge we discussed were. Can you please name them and maybe give us a brief explanation of what you remember about the sources of general knowledge? You're welcome to just raise your hand for this and then unmute your mic. We discussed four sources of general knowledge. Amy, you can go ahead and share with us.
Okay, hi. Is the sound good?
Yes, sound is good.
Okay, cool. All right, so the sources of knowledge are, as far as I remember, just 5 points, which were tradition, authority, mysticism and religion, common sense, and media myth. Those are the main 5. Can I just select one to focus on?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so authority, as an example, that is basically how we would accept what that person has to teach based on what their status is, such as, I don't know, an expert in a certain field, or say a principal or a PhD professor at a university. Whatever they have to offer, we usually we accept it without question. But sometimes that's not always a good way to accept knowledge. We have to try and question it as often as we can. Challenge authority.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thanks, Amy. Anyone else? There were 5 points. Amy's listed, shared them for us now. Can someone else give us just a quick reminder? Anyone? Because it really is, I want us to really share what we remember, so that I know that everyone really understood and was with us all as we talked through them. Because it really does not help us if every week I speak and I'm hearing my voice that I don't like hearing it so much, but and then I'm not really getting much feedback. So yeah, if I can have one more person share with us what they remember about the general sources of knowledge. I see, Fiona, your comment. Thank you. You mentioned religion. And you mentioned common sense. Okay. Sacred text with non-question knowledge. All right, thanks, Fiona. Okay, maybe with the next one. So then we also looked at the errors in human inquiry. We, after discussing the sources of general knowledge, we highlighted these issues, and as Amy also now mentioned, we highlighted what the issues are, which is sort of blindly accepting knowledge from certain sources. So what was the errors in human inquiry that we mentioned? If I can get two. So I'm not going to actually name the other stuff. So if nothing comes up, I'm going to assume that everyone does remember and everyone is comfortable with them. So I'm not going to recap those. Errors in human inquiry. No? Okay. Scientific norms. Then we discussed scientific norms, right? After touching on the errors in human inquiry, we said that science tries to guard us against these errors, right? Because science realizes that as humans, we are coming into the research space with certain judgments, with certain opinions that could hinder or impact the way that we go about evaluating our research or conducting our research. Do you remember any of the scientific norms that were mentioned? You're welcome to just put something in the chat. Honesty is important. Yes, that was a very crucial one. Scientific norms. These are things that are that definitely feature in assignments, in exams. So, no. Thank you. So we've got universalism, organized skepticism, disinterestedness, communalism, and honesty. Okay, I see, Tembi, you're struggling to join the chat, but okay, I think I'm going to assume since you were able to type in the chat that you can now see the other responses there. Sorry, we don't want anyone to miss out. Right, so Michelle has listed for us. I would have liked someone to maybe tell us their understanding of it. Because that's how we know that we understand, right? Once you're able to relay the definition or the meaning of something, that's when you can confidently say that you have learned and that you have understood this thing, and that whichever form it appears to you, whether it be in an exam or in an essay or an assignment, that you would be able to engage with that content. Right, I'm going to move on then. And then we looked at the stages of research. We said that even though we are doing inquiries daily, as we go about our lives, we are always doing little inquiries, but they're not necessarily research, right? It's not systematic. And then we looked at 4 stages of research. Do we know what those stages are? We should know. I'm wondering if we remember, or if we can maybe have our study units open so that we can recap together. Yes, we said firstly we define the problem. Thank you. to Kaki. Sorry if I'm butchering your name, Elizabeth. I hope you don't mind. I'll call you Elizabeth. Elizabeth, Nicole, and Amy said that we'll first define the problem or research question. Absolutely. And then we obtain our data. What do we do with it after? Analyze and interpret. Exactly. And then finally, we communicate the results. Thank you. It looks like I have in the room, I've got Elizabeth, Fiona, Sandra, Nicole, and Amy. So I would love to hear from the other, let me see how many we are today. So I'd love to hear from the other 15 of us that are in the room. Right, comparing with other results, so that falls within our analysis and interpretation. Thanks, Ibrahima. Okay, and Anine, I see you're with us. Welcome. Okay, so then, yeah, that was our stages of research. And then we moved on to ontology and epistemology. Again, I'm going to ask what we remember about these two terms. What are they? What is ontology? What is epistemology? What we believe is the truth. So which one is that, Fiona? Ontology. Okay. Epistemology. This is also a good time during the recaps. If there was a term that we didn't quite unpack last week, or you didn't quite get it, and you went maybe back to your notes and you tried to read through it and it didn't quite come together, this is also an opportunity to then ask and say, you know what, can we recap? So I'm not trying to catch anyone with these questions. I just want to ensure that we're all on the same page and that we all do understand before we move forward. Okay. No problem, Mildred. No problem. Okay. Thanks, Fiona. Fiona said epistemology is how we know what we believe, right? And then Amy has also told us that ontology has to do with what we perceive to be real or true. Absolutely. And then finally, so we looked at quite a lot last week, and I mean, I understand that, you know, it was a lot to take in, and if it was the first time engaging with this content, it does get very overwhelming. I mean, I suppose I can speak on it so confidently because I've engaged with it for now 2 years. But I you know, I do want you guys to also all get to the stage where you're comfortable with these terms and these definitions, because it is what will be assessed on. Okay, and then finally we looked at the 3 dominant approaches to research. Mildred, just to catch you up, we are just to catch up, last week we looked at Unit 1 of the study guide. So this week we are going to look at Unit 2, and so this is just a recap of what we covered in Unit 1. So if you have had a chance to go through Unit 1, you should be familiar with some of these terms that we are discussing. But welcome, and I hope you will be with us for the rest of the series. Okay, Elizabeth mentions the positivist approach. There are 2 more. Thank you. Right, so we have positivism, interpretive, and the critical approaches to research. And then Yes, so Amy says that the critical approach would be the preferred approach to research as it has more thorough nature. It has a more thorough nature. Yes, Nicole says, all right, I'm not going to read all the chats now, but I am really happy about the engagement and I don't feel so alone. So this is good. And I see that, we have retained some of the content that we covered. So just for the sake of time, I am going to move on. Thank you so much for your engagements, guys. And just a quick announcement from Adele is that you please post your student number in the chat if you haven't already, even though you have completed the attendance register. So we do need that information in both spaces. Thank you so much. Sweet. So let's move on. Today we're looking at study unit 2. I hope that everyone has had an opportunity to maybe peruse through it lightly or maybe heavily if you are consulting it for your assignment. So unit 2 talks to us about theory, about the role of theory in research. So let me just go to my notes. Okay. So, and as I said last week, this would help a lot more if I think you guys are following along with me. So having your study guides open, I'm hoping and assuming that everyone has an electronic version of the study guide. If you don't, please let me know so that we can get that to you. Yeah, but or if you have the hard copy, of course, that's also fine, as long as you have a way to follow along with us. Right, so in Unit 2, we look at theory. What is theory and why do we need it in our research? So we'll start by describing the relationship between theory and research, and really what theory means in terms of its purpose, what explanation it provides. We'll look at the scope of theory, and then we'll look at how theory comes in play in the research process. So what is theory? How do we define theory? And as I said last week, again, I'm really just walking through the study unit and trying to extract some key terms and information to simplify for us. Right, so when we are, I'm sure that we all hear the phrase, "Oh, this is my theory," right? When coronavirus came about, everyone had their own theory. It's like my theory is that it's the 5G and it's this and this. So, and from this explanation, we sort of see that theory is some sort of explanation about why something is happening, right? Some sort of statement about the nature of a particular phenomena. So yeah, the role then of theory is to make things that were hidden visible, or to define a pattern and give some sort of meaning to the observation, because we're always trying to find out why something is happening. For those who were with us last week, we had the example about the grumpy cashier. And so, we want to find out why is this cashier so grumpy, and in our minds we start developing some sort of theory about it, some sort of explanation about it. So that's essentially at the basis of it all what a theory is. A theory is some sort of explanation for why something's happening, for a social phenomena. It's some sort of answer to our questions, and it really asks the why and the how. Why is this happening? Oh, how is this happening? Right. Hope everyone is with us on that. Okay. And then the study guide also tells us that theory really, it has two. No, I'm sorry, I'm moving too fast there. Okay. So it provides us just sort of an interpretation of something that we have observed. So if I saw again continuously that this cashier is grumpy, that is something I've observed. It's an empirical observation. And then I'm trying to find an answer to, I'm trying to find the why, or I'm trying to find the how. How did this happen? If there was an accident on the N1, you know, we want to know how it happened. We want to know we want to get an explanation. So we want answers to the how and the why questions. And this is what the theory will provide us. So with the theory, we can have it, we have the scope and the level of abstraction of a theory. So what does a scope mean, right? The scope of a theory basically refers to how much it explains, or to how many different contexts the theory can explain, right? And that just means, you know, not all theories are going to be able to explain everything, right? So if I have a theory about the attitudes of service workers, you know, I probably sorry, I think I got cut off there for a minute. Okay, so if my theory is that service workers, which includes cashiers, are usually grumpy around a certain time because of the work that they do, right? That's a theory that I have on service workers. So I can't take that theory and apply it to kids and say, yeah, 10-year-olds are usually grumpy around 4 o'clock because of the work that they do. It doesn't fit, right? Also, just logically doesn't make sense. So theories also have to follow some sort of logical reasoning. So yeah, so that's really the scope of our theory, and it is linked to the level of abstraction achieved by the concepts in the theory. So really what this means is that, okay, let me go through the whole thing and then explain. So the higher the level of abstraction, the more the theory can be generalized and the wider its applicability. And then we say that the opposite of abstract is concrete. So let me maybe just break that down. When we're talking about something that's abstract, it is something that usually we cannot touch, right? We cannot see. It's these concepts that we can't necessarily like perceive naturally. That's something that's abstract. If you think about you know, abstract paintings, it's usually those paintings where it's just like lines and crosses and circles, and you can't really like say that it's a particular thing, right? That's what abstract is. It's very difficult to sort of pin down. Something like kindness is an abstract concept, because although we can see the effects of kindness, we can't see kindness itself. Not the same way that I can see a table, which is concrete, right? Which is something I can touch, I can push it, I can feel it. That's concrete. So bringing it back to our theory, we say that we can have theories that are abstract, theories that are we can't necessarily see. You know, they're just this really, like, they make sense and we can see the effects of it, but we can't see the theory itself. And then we have, of course, theories that are very concrete, that are more like, okay, if I push, so if I push a table, it's going to fall over. That's a theory, and that's a concrete theory because I can physically see the act, right? I can physically perform the act of pushing a table and seeing it fall over. Very concrete, very obvious to see. But if I say that this person is depressed, depression is also an abstract theory, right? So if I say that, oh, this person is depressed because they're lonely. Loneliness is also very abstract. We can't see loneliness. We only see the effects of loneliness. So those are theories that are more abstract, that are more difficult to see. So when we consider the scope of a theory in terms of generalizability, we distinguish between empirical generalization, middle range, and theoretical frameworks. And why we bring up the concept of generalizability is because, remember, with theories and with research generally, we want to be able to apply it to different contexts, right? It's not, I won't say it's useless, but it's very limiting if you have a theory that can only speak to one thing. For example, the theory of what is it? Isaac Newton? Is it Isaac Newton? The gravity guy. Sorry, I did not do I didn't do science, so you guys must just forgive me. But the law of gravity, right? If something drops, it falls. Newton, thank you, thanks guys. Something falls, so that is a theory that can be applied to different things. Everything, we can apply the law of gravity to a range of different things. So that makes it a generalizable theory. But if I just say, if I base a theory on something very, very specific, like instead of saying the table will fall over, I say this table. So I'm only talking about this table, and I'm saying and basically putting forth the assumption that it doesn't apply to other tables. So if I just say Lauren is depressed because that's a theory based on just Lauren, just me. So we can't take this theory and put it on my sister, right? Because then the circumstances are very different. So that's why I'm saying generally with theories, you want it to be generalizable. You want to be able to apply to different contexts. And that's what we say when we talk about the scope of the theory as well, and generalization of theory. So there are three ways that we can then distinguish between these how theories are generalized. Yes. The first one is empirical generalizations. The second one is middle range theory, and the third one is theoretical perspectives. So our study unit tells us that empirical generalizations help us to classify, summarize, and organize observations. So this type of generalization is the first step towards abstraction, but it's still close to the concrete information the researcher has collected. So the generalizability of the relationship proposed between the phenomena is limited. So it's that thing. Remember, when we talk about empirical, it's about observable facts, right? Observable data. So if we say empirical generalization, something we've observed, we can quickly generalize. So I've observed that this cashier, I think I must just stick to a base example. So I've observed that this cashier is grumpy, right? And then I see some other cashiers. I've done an empirical study, or I've observed, right, a few cashiers. And then I can go and say, cashiers generally are grumpy around this time. So I generalize it, but I'm still close to my base data. I'm still close to my empirical observation, because my theory is still based on cashiers. But if I were to go, so that's our empirical generalization. And then the next step is our middle range theory, which then begins to organize our observations in a way that explains the relationship between them in more general terms. So I've started with just saying, okay, cashiers, because that was what my empirical study brought out. That's what I observed. But then I can go one step forward and say, actually, let me apply this to not just cashiers, but people in general working in service industry. Let me look at waiters and who else works in receptionists and people who are dealing with people on an everyday basis. let me look at these people and see if the same concept applies. So I would then take the theory that I got from my empirical study, my empirical generalization, and then I further observe patterns in the same scope of then I continue to observe more in a wider scope, and then I can then take that and make a broader generalization. So it moves from just cashiers are grumpy because da 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 to people working in service industry are usually grumpy because, you know, maybe it's how the customers act or it's their working hours. So I have been able to now take my empirical generalization and move it to a middle range theory because it's now based on more than just one group of people. I hope that comes across clearly. Please let me know if it doesn't. And then we go even broader to the theoretical perspective, which gives an overall explanation of a particular phenomena. So this means that a particular study would only provide partial evidence, right, to support a question or some of that perspective's proposition. Yeah, so the theoretical framework is, I would say, then the next step where it's almost completely removed your theory. It's like not even a theory at this point. Now it's a perspective. It's like an idea, right? It's a perspective of how service workers react to certain things. So it now begins to guide our thinking. So that's what a perspective does, right? It's like a guided way of thinking. It's like, oh, my perspective on this is, or this is how I think about this. So it had moved from this empirical generalization to a middle range theory to something that actually then becomes a part of the way we think about something. Okay. So yeah, I hope that is clear and everyone is still with me. Can we maybe think about some examples beyond what I have now tried to work with this cashier example? What other examples can we think about of empirical generalizations? Remember, it's based on you observe certain facts, you observe a phenomena, and then you try to basically make generalizations based on what you've observed. Can we think of something, just something in your everyday life, even maybe? Let's hear some other interesting examples so that maybe I can get some better ideas about examples. You're welcome at this point to raise, yeah. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Mildred?
Okay, I'm not sure. I'll just try. There's a general tendency that people think that nurses in public hospitals are uncaring.
Okay. So what would that be?
Sorry?
So what would that be from the three that we discussed now?
I think it's an empirical generalization.
And how would you say that people come to that conclusion? So sort of what was observed?
Probably some people, when they go to the hospitals or clinics, the way they are treated, they just think maybe that's how the nurses in public hospitals treat patients.
All right, exactly. Thanks, Mildred. So yeah, that is empirical generalization, and we do it almost every day, all the time. We're always sort of doing this. This is also quite a good one. Taxi drivers don't follow the rules of the road. I think at this point, this is a perspective, like it's a theory. We can't even say it's just a generalization. That's a solid theory that has been proved time and time again. Thank you. Yeah, so we will move on. Would racial discrimination fall under empirical generalization? Okay, can you maybe explain or clarify, maybe, Amy? Just
Okay, hi.
Hey.
All right. So in terms of like observations, what we may experience personally or what our friends or family may experience themselves, from maybe from a person who may be black or who is colored or who is Native American, whoever the case is. Perhaps one bad experience would make the person create a general theory about the whole group of those people, whoever they may be. Maybe a religion, maybe a race, maybe a culture, maybe a country, or something like that. I'm not sure how accurate that is.
No, I hear you. So yes, that would actually, that is, I think, just generalizations, right? Stereotyping and prejudicing. Is that a word? Yeah, those are basic generalizations. I think I just want to, maybe I probably didn't make this clear, but also with Mildred's example, so these are more just your common generalizations that we make, right? We observe one instance and then we make a generalization that this is how all nurses are, or this is how all Black people are, or how all Indians are. So those are just generalizations. But when we talk about empirical, it's observable fact, but it's in the scope of research. So it is more systematic observable facts, if I can say that, right? So it's not that you've just experienced one nurse being mean to you. You sort of went around and systematically observed nurses in a particular district and then made an empirical generalization. Without that systematic collection of data and observation, it really is just everyday generalization, right? So I hope that's clear. And then would middle range theory be categorizing your observations? Yes. And really just broadening it. Yeah, that's a really good. No, it's not a set example. It's a good one. Yeah, so you make patterns. Once you have your empirical generalization is really just the starting ground, right? The what's on the ground, what's the fact, what have I observed, and what generalizations can I make based on what I've observed. And then with middle range, it goes a little bit more high level, and you try to find patterns between them. Okay, so it happened with cashiers, but then it also happened with receptionists, and it also happened with waiters. Now I start to see a pattern that it's not only this particular group of employees, it's this industry. So then you find a pattern and and then you try to explain that in that way. The research that was done at Stellenbosch last year again kind of was bad empirical. Yeah, that was just wrong, actually. I will just go with Anine on that one. Yeah, I would say it was empirical generalization, but of course that was very faulty, and in terms of research norms and values, that it just crossed so many lines. So yeah, that was just wrong. But yes, it was empirical generalization. Okay, so we'll just move on. Yeah, and I mean it's interesting because when you read the reports, it's not quite clear how that study actually went through to publication. There's still lots of inquiries into that. So yeah, it is what it is, unfortunately. Okay, so next as we start reconsidering the relationship between theory and research. So we discussed research last week, and I mean we've been now discussing, and as we talk, we begin to uncover and unpack the nature of research even more. And now we've introduced this thing called theory. So how does the two of them come together? All right. It's clear that, you know, of course, theory does play an important role in research. The study guide tells us that theory makes facts intelligible, all right, or it frames it in a way that helps us to make sense of it better. And it also gives the researcher sort of a guide as to what to focus on, particularly, just like Anine, your example there. If the researcher just went in on their own and was looking at the cashiers, maybe the first assumption would be that, okay, they are tired. But if they, you know, they look into the theory, and I mean, theory is something that we create as we research, but there are already existing theories out there that researchers also pull from to help them inform their own research. So if I, as a researcher, went out and I started reading about, you know, attitudes and behaviors of service workers, and what other researchers have found and what theories have been accepted out there, blood sugar could come up. And that's something that I would not necessarily have thought about. But now the theory is helping me to also identify another element of this phenomena that I'm studying. So it helps the researcher to also, you know, focus on certain essential characteristics of what they're studying. So the relationship between then theory and research, the study unit tells us, is reciprocal, because empirical studies are based on theory, and theories in turn are based on empirical studies. So I cannot just, when I'm wanting to study this thing, there's already a theory that I'm either drawing from or that I am wanting to prove, right? And then and how do we come, oh, sorry, it's so loud here. And how do we come across accepting a theory? It's after we have studied something repeatedly, right? That the community then says that, okay, this is actually something we accept. This explains this phenomena perfectly. Right, we accept it. So they influence each other, like that, theory and research. Yes, theory and empirical studies. Okay. So then we have this theorist, I suppose, Chevets, identified two forms of reasoning or processing, because this is what we're doing when we are working with theories. You know, we're trying to reason, and at the base of it all is like trying to just get an understanding of like why this is happening, what is happening, how it's happening. So then we are presented with two processes of reasoning, which you're probably quite familiar with at this point. It is deduction and induction. So deduction involves the process of testing a general idea or a theory that we have, and then finding out if this theory actually applies to this particular context, to a concrete context. So it's like you're basically moving from general to specific. from abstract to concrete. I think that's a good way to remember it. So if I'm going in and my theory is that service workers have high blood sugar levels. That's a theory that I'm going in with, right? Now I'm going in and I'm studying it, and I want to see by the end of that study if in fact these service workers that I've studied have high blood pressure for the reasons that the theory said. So basically you're allowing the theory to guide your research, right? And then with induction, it's the opposite. It's that I'm looking at, my starting point is with the data or with the empirical observation. And then from that, I get a theory, right? And this is sort of the way we usually do it. We usually are, I think, we usually go with inductive reasoning because we see something and then we come up with a theory. But deduction is also something that is, I think, mostly used in the natural sciences, where it's that we have a theory first and now we want to not necessarily apply it, but see if it can apply to the what we're studying. And what becomes interesting here is that they always warn researchers against trying to sort of fit your data into the theory. Like if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. So you could have a theory and it makes sense, but then you go in and you do your research and you see that actually this theory doesn't fully apply to what I've studied. My data is not telling me the thing that the theory told me that my data would tell me. And in that case, you know, it's just up to the researcher to then perhaps at that point make their own theory or adapt the theory based on what their data has actually told them. Right, is everyone happy with that? What are some examples of deduction that you have encountered? Or that, just examples of a research study that would use deduction. Well, I'd love to hear more about this. Sabira, are you able to maybe expound on the theory and how it would be applied to deductive or inductive reasoning? Sabira, are you able to? I'm not sure. Are you able to use your mic? Okay, so I was saying your theory. So you say smoking delays bone healing. That you're presenting that as a theory. So I was just asking if you could maybe expound on that a bit more. How would you relate that to deduction or induction?
Okay. Good evening, Jordan. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Okay. Hello. I think in high school I did a science project on smoking delaying bone healing. So that would kind of be like a hypothesis. So then with deduction, you would have to then prove that smoking really delays bone healing. And then from that, you have to do research to determine whether that is true. So I don't know if deduction is like a hypothesis. The theory is a theory another word for hypothesis, perhaps?
Not entirely, but it does guide It does guide, and we will discuss hypothesis later in the session. So I hope it will come together then. I think the difference between the theory is that it has been proven already. It has been accepted by the community, and the hypothesis is you still want to prove the theory, the hypothesis through your research. So at the end of your research, you will say, okay, it's proved correct or it's incorrect. But a theory is sort of, it's already been accepted that this is a theory. You just want to see now if it applies to your study.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And then Amy, you've said that deduction should be applied in police work by observing culprits. Okay. So are you thinking around if the theory in, say, in the police force, they've got the theory is people, this is a very silly one. If you see people who wear Gap hoodies are usually like culprits, right? So that's, and I'm saying it's very silly because of course a theory, remember, is not an assumption. What I've said is like more of an assumption, more of a generalization, but a theory is something that has been proved already. So let's just say that, okay, this is something that has been absolutely proved. The data is there, the research is there. Okay, we've got our theory, people who wear Gap hoodies are culprits. So then it would then be for every police officer then, I suppose, who sees someone wearing a Gap hoodie, they should then like take them in for questioning. Is that sort of your thinking? So using the theory to guide their work or their findings of criminals. Okay, gotcha. Cool. I think just, yeah, I must maybe just highlight that as we work through these examples, we must just be mindful that, like I said, it's not a theory and an assumption is very different. Most of the examples that, I probably bring up are more just assumptions, but of course, if there is studies on it, if there is data on it, then I can say for sure that these are theories, but I haven't done the research and I haven't done the readings on these, so I wouldn't know. So yeah, just maybe just putting it out there. So following what the evidence says and forming a theory or case on it, so that would be induction, because you're starting with the evidence, you're starting with the concrete, what you see, and then you move up to forming some sort of theory around it. All right. Okay. So I think we're all happy with the induction versus deduction. The study unit gives us a very nice example, actually. It says that, it's very weird. It says that an example of induction is when I conclude that I'm no good at ballroom dancing when I keep on making a fool of myself time after time and always step on my partner's toes. So in this case, I connect a number of observations of the same kind of thing. So my experiences in ballroom dancing, I connected to the fact that, oh, it must mean that I'm useless in ballroom. So I make a theory based on observable facts. But even in this example, we see that it wasn't just a one-time thing. I didn't just observe it once, right? Observed it a couple of times, time and time again is what the study unit says. So I've observed this time and time again, and then I made a theory or generalization that, okay, it means I'm no good. So that's our induction. And then for deduction, they said it is the opposite. Like I said, we start with a general. So saying, oh, I'm not good at this. Or the example they gave us is that I conclude that Venus must revolve around the sun because Venus is a planet and all planets revolve around the sun. So basically it's like saying, oh, all dogs bark. So that means this dog must also bark, so we're going from a general to a specific, we're applying it to a specific. Yeah. So yeah, I think we have covered this so much, and next week I'm hoping that everyone will be like really excited to recap that section because we talked about it so much. Okay, now the study guide sort of shifts and takes us away from the theoretical part and takes us to the research again, and how exactly this everything we've talked about sort of applies to the research stage. Exactly. So that's exactly a very easy way to remember it. Deduction, you move from the large or general to the specific, and induction, you move from specific to general. So from broad to specific, specific to broad. Okay. So then we start talking about our research process again. And the conceptual groundings of research, essentially, the study unit is asking, how do social researchers tackle empirical social reality? How do we go about finding this information to get to these theories? And it tells us that careful planning at the initial stage of the research is crucial. And we did talk about this last week when we said that even when you're building a house, the first thing you do is you set down a blueprint, right? A plan, a detailed plan of how you're going to go about building the house. Similar to research, we need to look at how the research is planned. And this includes deciding on what topic we're going to use, conducting a literature review, focusing on a specific problem, and formulating a hypothesis. So all of this forms part of stage 1 of our research stages. Remember that we said we have define the problem, obtain data, analyze and interpret, and then share results. So what we're going to look at now is actually the foundations of the first stage of the research project. So the first thing we have to do is we have to decide on a topic to research, right? Obviously, because the point of our research is we want to discover something. So we need to know what the something is that we want to discover. We need to know what problem needs to be solved. So McNeil points out that the choice of a topic is never really made in a vacuum. That is, it's not just out of the blue that you come up with a research topic. Both the researcher and the context in which the research is conducted actually have an impact on each other. So most of the times a researcher will choose a topic because they are personally interested in it. So it wasn't just like, oh, yeah. Sorry, I just had a brain freeze. Okay. So yeah, most times if you are personally interested, if it has some sort of significance to you personally, or if it's something that happened to you, for example, again, my cashier example, if I observed this, if this happened to me, I went to the shop and I had a bad experience with the cashier. Now I'm interested in finding out more, like why and how, and I want to know more. So it's not something that just was like completely removed from the researcher. Okay, thanks, Anine. See you next week. Okay, so then this personal interest ensures that the researcher will actually be committed to it. And this is, I think, one of the nice things when you get to choose your own research project or your own research topic, is because you have a stronger motivation and commitment to completing it, because it's something that you want to know, and of course it has to have significance and we'll talk about social and academic research significance, but at the core of it, it's something that you encountered, something that you observed, and you want to know, you want to find a solution to it. So beyond the researcher's interest, we say there are two other factors that influence the choice of the research topic. The first one is the social significance, and the second one is the scientific significance of the research topic. So when we talk about the social significance, we're basically bringing back to the fore the fact that research, especially in social science, has a practical relevance, or it needs to be socially relevant, right? It has to be trying to solve a societal issue, because this is what social science research is about. It's about society. So we want to solve a problem in society. If I'm seeing that there is a high level of high school dropouts in my area, that's a problem that I want to solve through my research. And I know that at the end of it, it will have a practical relevance to my society, to my community, to the school. So yes, so it needs to have that element for the most part. And of course then to finding solutions, because it's not just about asking the hows and the whys. As I said last week, it's also about finding a solution to then mitigate, or finding a solution to just prevent this from continuously happening in your community or in your area. So that's that. And it also tells us that if a particular research is commissioned or funded by an agency or organization which deals with a problem, then that research is also then linked, will have policy objectives, and needs to absolutely have a solution at the end. So for example, if the Department of Education says, listen, they need to know why there's so much high school dropouts, that is, then I can go along and conduct research, knowing that the purpose of that research is to solve a problem, but also to perhaps inform policy. So maybe there's something in the system that is preventing us learners from going all the way to matric and completing their high school. So then I'm working with that mindset that this research is actually going to have practical relevance and policy implications for the school, for this government, etc. And then the next is research will also have a scientific significance, and the scientific significance really refer to the fact that your research, any research that is done, will be contributing to the scientific community. The minute you publish something, you have added to the scientific community, you have added to knowledge on that particular topic. So yes, there may have been lots of other people who have written on high school dropouts, but you're adding to this topic in this particular area at this particular school, just a more detailed element, or just a different element. And of course, you'll most likely have found something that other people haven't found, because that's also something we want to do in research. You want to identify the gaps, because if everyone has been studying this thing and there's still a problem, that means there's a gap somewhere, right? So, and maybe you're not going to fill the whole gap, but you would have found maybe one piece of the gap that you're like, you know what, I have another piece of the puzzle. I think we can even think about research and the research community as a puzzle, where each researcher comes in with their own piece. It's like, you know what, it's not going to solve all the problems, but it is, it's bringing us one step closer. So you're adding a piece of the puzzle, and that's then the scientific significance of your research. Adding to the field, adding to the puzzle, helping the community get one step closer to finding the answer. Right. So to summarize, what we've said is that there are three factors that influence the choice of a research topic. The first one being personal interest, something that is close to you, something you've experienced, something you've observed. The next one is the need to solve a particular problem. And number 3 is the need to develop theories, and that's when we talked about scientific significance, because you have added to theory. Okay. Hope we're all still together. The next step in our phase, in our research stages, is then, no, it's still the first stage. It's just the next element within the first stage. So at this point, we're still defining, right? So the next step is conducting a literature review. And the study guide tells us that once we have identified a topic, we then need to move into narrowing it down to a researchable question, right? And then and we do this by examining what the literature says about it, because most often than not, it's not the thing that you're going to be researching. You're not the first person to research it. I know they always say you need to be original in the research, of course, but generally the main topic isn't something new. It's what will be new is mostly where you're going to do your research on, and maybe there's a different element or different angle that you're taking. But the topic itself, like high school dropout rates, is not a new subject. It's not new. Depression rates among university students, it's not new. People have studied this. Levels of training for primary school teachers, it's not new, right? People have studied it. So yeah, I can't remember where I was going with that one. But yes, so you want to find out, okay, this is where I was going. So you want to find out, what have other people said already about this topic, right? So this will help you to, it introduces you as a researcher to the debate and the arguments surrounding this topic. So what have other researchers said about this high school dropouts? You know, what have other people found? And this also helps because it helps you as the researcher identify gaps. If you, through your reading, was like, okay, as you're reading, you're like, but no one is talking about this aspect, you know, so, and you note that down, and as you continue reading, you keep seeing that all the articles and all the books that you're reading, they don't discuss this aspect. Now you've already identified a gap. So this is going to be your piece of the puzzle that you're going to add, because you've seen that all these people have written about this and no one has actually mentioned this element. Sorry, can everyone still hear me? Sorry. Yes, thank you. Okay, so as you conduct your literature review, yes, it helps you to identify the gaps, as I said, and to also avoid unnecessary duplication by researching something that people have already covered. So if we're looking at the high school dropouts and you wanted to look at peer pressure, you know, as a factor to high school dropouts, but then you read all these articles on all these books and almost everyone mentions this already. That then helps you to say that, okay, as you're defining your topic, you say, maybe I'm not going to talk about peer pressure. Although it is a factor, you can mention that peer pressure is a factor, but you're not going to delve deep. You know, you're not going to spend time trying to analyze and find data on that, because it has been so widely written about already. So it avoids duplication, right? And this really is, yes, just part of this process of refining your topic, because maybe, yeah. refining your topic. I'm going to leave it at that. So then the researcher is then challenged as they are doing your literature review to think about how your work extends, modifies, supports, or challenges that of others. And this is where, yeah, like I said, you know, if you find something that you agree with, then, you know, in your literature review, you can actually put that forward, that, you know, this person put forth this theory, which, you know, you agree with, or you stand behind, or, you know, you find something that someone wrote about, then they said that, you know, people also drop out of high school because of the areas that they live in. And if you don't agree with that based on what you have read, then that's something that you can also challenge in your review of the literature. So yeah, the literature review really gives us a nice way to further define or refine our topic, and yes, and really be as knowledgeable as possible about what you're writing about. Okay. Maybe just yeah, the literature review. I think a question that is a question that is often asked with the literature review is, you know, how much do you need to read? How many articles? How many books? How many journals do you need to read to get a solid understanding of the research topic? And really, I don't think there's like a set number. I think it just gets to the point where you start coming across repetitions of the same thing. Once your literature is no longer telling you something new, I think that's then a good point for you to say, okay, I think I've gotten a solid understanding of this topic, because that's also what the literature review helps us to do, to get a solid understanding of the topic, and to introduce you to aspects that you would not have thought about, and that you can now actually include as part of your topic. So yeah, like I said, all of this forms part of defining our problem. Okay, next is specifying a research question. So it should be apparent, and I'm just going to read here, it should be apparent then from our discussion, what we just talked about, the literature review, that there are a number of issues that can be dealt with and studied in any particular topic that is chosen, right? And that's what I said, we can have one topic and have 200 people have written on the same topic, but in different variations, you know, in different contexts, different angles. So then it becomes important, so then it's important for the researcher to not immediately formulate a specific research question. So just because you've observed something and you want to find the answer to it, it doesn't mean you should immediately go and say, this is my research question. It is then important to first take that step of conducting a literature review, so that you can then say, okay, actually, I was going to like look at the most basic thing, but now I see that that's been looked at already. I need to do a little bit more work. Right, so this then is important, because if the researcher cannot limit. Okay, thanks, Amy. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Okay, so it really helps the researcher to clearly limit what they're going to be studying, to focus and hone in on what they're going to study. Because if you can't delimit, or if you can't sort of put a limit on what or why question, what are you studying, why are you studying it, then the research will sort of, they say, will be hopelessly muddled. So it has a very low success rate, I would say. So the other thing that is important when thinking about your research question is thinking about the feasibility of it. Is it possible for you to conduct this research? You know, a lot of times as researchers, we come in with a lot of great ideas about, oh, I want to like interview all the cashiers in Cape Town. You know, that's not feasible. You're only one person. So, it then becomes also important for the researcher to start thinking about the feasibility of it. How many people would you be able to interview? And what does this mean for your study? What does it mean for generalizability? Because if you're only interviewed 5 people, you can't really generalize, because that sample is not representative of the population, right? And we'll talk about samples and populations in the obtaining information stage. So feasibility is crucial, they tell us. And the researcher will then have to maybe tweak their research question according to what is possible. So if I wanted to initially say, I want to study the attitudes, I want to study the attitude of cashiers in Cape Town, then I need to maybe go in and tweak that, because after realizing I can't access all the cashiers in Cape Town, or I can't access enough cashiers that are going to make my sample representative. Therefore, maybe I'm going to say I want to study the ShopRite cashiers in the northern suburbs. So I specify a little bit more so that I know that, okay, it is feasible. If there are like 20 or 15 ShopRites in the northern suburbs, then I can maybe reach all of them. But then again, with that, you also need to be further more specific, because what is the northern suburbs? From where to where? Which areas? So maybe then you scale even downer and say, from, what is the northern suburbs? Like Goodwood to Belleville, and then you say you're only looking at the cashiers at ShopRite from Goodwood to Belleville. You see how it becomes then very specific, and that is how the research question needs to be quite specific. Thanks, Sabira. Guys, as you leave and as you pop out, please make sure to fill in the feedback evaluation form. I don't want us to forget as we go. So yes, please just do that before you leave. It is in the chat. So please let me know if you're leaving. Please just do that before you go. So yes, as I said, specifying your research question allows you, or the researcher, to identify the essence of the research, where, and this forms part of your plan, forms part of your house. Is it the house? Your blueprint, the blueprint of your house, because now you know exactly how many windows you're going to have in the house. You know exactly what pipes are needed, because you've specified it to the point where everything is clear. Okay. And then we go into hypothesis and framing a hypothesis. Maybe before we continue, are there any questions at this point? We've covered quite a bit, and I don't want to lose anyone. So I'm just gonna maybe give us 2 minutes to just absorb everything that we just talked about, and then if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in. Okay, I'm going to assume that we are all still good. We're still taking it in. Right, so far we've talked about, we moved from theory into research. And we looked at the role of research, the role of theory, sorry, in the research, how theory defines our research. Then we went into our stage 1 of the research project, which is defining the problem. We talked about what elements or what factors come into play when we are deciding on a research topic. We also talked about conducting a literature review. We said why that's so important in the research project in helping us define our research topic. So I think just very important. I think a lot of times students and researchers, we think the literature review is just, yeah, something I must just read a bunch of material and summarize it. No, the main aim of the literature review is to help you as the researcher to refine your topic so that you don't duplicate things that have already been said, and that you can further identify which element you want to discuss in your research. We talked about specifying our research question even more and why it is so important, because we need to know what we're studying, what exactly we're studying. We can't just say cashiers in Cape Town. What about those cashiers? Which cashiers? Is it all cashiers? Is it new cashiers? Is it almost retiring cashiers? So we begin to need very specific details at this point to frame our research, to ensure that our blueprint for our house is detailed enough so that if someone has to pick it up, they will know exactly what they need to do with that project. Now we're talking about framing a hypothesis. I hope everyone is still with me. Okay, so what is a hypothesis? Really, I think, was it Sabira that mentioned it, but she's had to leave now. So a hypothesis is a tentative statement of the relationship between two or more variables. And we say tentative, what do we mean when we say tentative? Really, we're not sure yet, right? So when you get an invitation to a meeting and you say tentative, it's like, I'm saying yes for now, but like, I'm not sure. It's not yet confirmed. So a hypothesis really is a statement that's not yet confirmed. It's not yet been proved, but it's sort of something you're gonna just let you say for now. For now, this is what we're going with until we can prove it. So so it helps us to understand the relationship. Words. So it helps us to understand the relationship between two or more variables, and in many ways. Right, so we start then really thinking about, okay, the study guide tells us, okay, thanks, Nicole. Thank you. See you next week. I think we're going to be rounding up soon, so thank you for all of you who are still here. If you do need to leave, it's okay. The recordings will be uploaded and you can just go and watch the last few minutes that you weren't able to watch. So yeah, that's fine. Just remember to fill out the evaluation form, please. Thank you. Okay, so really in many ways, the hypothesis is it's a guess, right? That indicates, but not just a guess, it's an informed guess that indicates what we can expect to find in our research. And why we say it's not just any guess, but an informed guess, it's because it's somewhat based on an understanding of some theory, right? So I have an idea of a theory. That's why I'm saying it's an informed guess. Even when you tentatively accept that invitation, it's an informed decision because you're like, oh, I think I am going to be free. So you check that your schedule is free, but something might happen. So you're leaving it open for the possibility of something coming in. So it's an informed guess that about what we think will happen. And most times we have an idea about what we think will happen. If I say, if I push this table, my hypothesis is that it will fall. That is an informed guess based on maybe previous experience that the disc fell. And this is then what I'm expecting to find when I do my research. So essentially, we're starting to think about possible answers to our questions, to the questions that we ask. The minute we start asking them, we already sort of have an idea of what we're going to ask. And this is also where the literature review becomes helpful. Yes, because then it's not just, this is the informed part of it. It's not just based on our own assumptions or our own experiences. We use our literature, the review that we've just done, we bring it in to say that, okay, this is what the literature says. So based on all of these factors, I can sort of make an assumption or an informed guess about what will happen, about what answer I will find at the end of this. So essentially the hypothesis is a formal statement related to a particular context. And this enables the researcher, or it enables you to gather information to empirically determine whether the relationship applies or not. So you're basically putting forth a particular statement, and you want to, then we'll do your research to see if it is true or not. And the hypothesis, I think it's important to just note that it's not just any statement. It's not just saying that cashiers are upset because they are tired, right? The hypothesis is a bit more sophisticated in that you want to explain a relationship. So a relationship means if one thing is happening to one element, something else is happening to the other element, right? So there's a relationship there. So as far as hypothesis is concerned, we distinguish between two types of hypotheses, and you may be familiar with this already. The first is the dependent variable, and then the independent variable. So let's maybe just break this down a little bit. If we are looking at the high school dropout case, right, and I have to put forth a hypothesis, basically I have to say, what do I think is happening here? So then I will say that, okay, I think that children are dropping out because they don't have friends. So there I have two variables, right? The students dropping out and the lack of friendship there. Oh, sorry, dropping out, the act of dropping out, and the lack of friendships. Those are two variables that I'm looking at. So I'm looking at the relationship there. I'm saying that the one thing is happening because the other thing isn't there. So yeah, when we talk about analyzing data, analyzing quantitative data, we'll look at something called correlation, which is just analyzing the relationship between two things. But we're not going into that now. Right now, we're just saying that we're looking at two variables, and we're saying that there's a relationship between them, and that's what we're going to put forth in our hypothesis. So the dependent variable is the thing that is changing, right? The thing that is influenced or is changed is the effect. What is the end result? What is the end result in our example? The dropping out. That's the end result. That's the effect that we see at the end of the day. And then the independent variable is the thing that is influencing the dependent variable, or it's the cause. So we're saying, what am I saying is the cause of students dropping out? I'm saying it's the lack of friends. So then in this example, the dependent variable is the dropping out, because that's the thing that's changing. And the independent variable is the lack of friends or not, right? I hope everyone gets that. If it's not 100% clear, please go back into your study unit and just read it again, and we can, in our recap next week, we can probably look at it some more. So ultimately, yeah, we have these two variables, and we're saying that this one affects the other one. So if students had friends, then the assumption is they wouldn't drop out. But if they don't have friends, the assumption is that they would drop out. So there is a relationship there between having friends and if you drop out or not. Okay. So I hope that's okay. And then I think this is our final aspect is we talk about operationalizing concepts. And so it's important that the concepts that we use in the research project are clearly defined. And so what are our concepts? Our concepts are the terms that we're using in our research, the things that we are studying. So if I'm studying depression rates in university student, I need to clearly define what depression is, because I can't assume that everyone reading it will know what depression is. And even if they know what depression is, it doesn't mean that they're understanding it from the viewpoint that I'm understanding it. So I need to then take this term and I need to operationalize. Maybe before that. I need to provide conceptual clarity on this term. So I'm saying that I'm studying depression. This is the definition that I'm using in my study of depression, right? Because everyone, I don't know how many definitions there are of various things. So it can get very confusing. So it's very important from the bat to say, I'm studying depression, this is the definition that I'm using, or I'm studying the attitude of this is the definition of attitudes that I'm using. Attitudes is, again, a very abstract concept. So it's important to actually conceptualize it, to define it. So that's how we then provide that conceptual clarity. And then we have this process of conceptualizing, which basically means defining the terminology. Sorry, that's just what I said. That's when we provide that definition, we don't just define it to say that this is the definition that we are using, but we define it in a way that we can use it in our hypothesis, right? So if I'm saying depression causes high rates of failure in students, so then I need to define depression so that it can be used in my hypothesis, and that there's no way of someone misunderstanding what I mean when I say depression. And then operationalization of that term then means that we take that word, that term, and we turn it into something that is measurable, right? Something that can be measured, because with everything in research, you need to be able to measure it. So someone might ask you, fine, you're studying depression. How are you determining what depression looks like, right? Because depression is an abstract term. So what does it look like? How are you going to look at a subject or a participant in your study and say this person has depression? What are the things that you're going to be looking out for? So this is the point of operationalizing the term, right? Operationalizing the term, taking it and really saying that depression is this, and this is sort of the characteristics that we will be looking out for, because then you might not be able to measure depression, but you can measure, what can you measure? How many times this person goes out, or you can measure how they feel about certain things. So you basically need to break that big term down into things that we can actually measure, things that we can actually observe. I can actually ask the person, how many times did you go out this month? How many friends did you see in the past 6 months? Have you, so those are things that you can actually measure, but you can't measure someone's depression. You can't say, what's your level of depression? It's not something that we can measure. So operationalization basically is like making an invisible term more visible so that we can measure it, because that's what we need to do in research. We need to be able to observe and measure. So yeah, it's really making it an empirical variable. And as we said, empirical is things that we study, things that we can observe. Yes, things that we can observe. So that's what we are trying to do with operationalization. And then we have basically indicators that help us to measure these things. So if I'm saying depression, I've operationalized it. What are the things that we want to, what are the indicators? Sorry, that's maybe a more accurate term. What are the indicators that will help me to determine that this person is depressed? So those are the things that I said, like maybe the person hasn't gone out in weeks. The person said that, they don't want to go outside, or just various things, so that I can say these are the indicators. So if someone else would, sorry, let me go back. So if I conclude that this person is depressed, I need to be able to give that report to someone else and they must see the same thing, right? And how that will happen with me, because I said that how I am measuring depression, or what my indicators are for depression, is this, and this person actually has all of these things. So therefore, I can say that this person is depressed. I hope that is clear. Do you guys have any questions about that? So this, I would actually really encourage us to go back and really read this, because it does come up quite a lot. And it's important that we're able to understand, like, it needs to make sense in our heads. What this concept mean, these terms mean: operationalizing, conceptualizing. What is an indicator? What is an empirical variable? What is a variable? What's an independent variable? What's a dependent variable? Right? So I hope we're all good with that. And that brings us, that brings us to the end of our session. Thank you so much for sticking with it and seeing us through. Sorry, if there are any questions, I'm going to open the floor up. Otherwise, next week we're doing, sorry, I forgot to edit that one. Next week we're doing Unit 3. Next week we're doing Unit 3, and yes, we will do a recap again. So please do go back and try to really refamiliarize yourself with some of the concepts that we discussed today. Because, repetition, and I keep saying repetition invokes learning. And so the more we expose ourselves to something, the more we're able to hold on to it. So yes, that's it for today. I'll see you next week. We'll do Unit 3, and I hope you have a lovely, lovely week. The weather's really good, so try to get out, take a walk, do something nice. Please remember to fill out the evaluation form. It is in the chat. And that will be it for today.
Lorraine? Adele.
Yes. Yes, hi, Adele.
Hi. I've also posted the link to the one-on-one session request form in the chat section, so students can also grab it from there.
Okay. Thanks, Adele.
Okay.
Okay, so if you guys do want to book that one-on-one session, please feel free to just use that link there. And I'm quite flexible with, finding a time that will work for both of us, that we can chat through some of the issues you're having. All right.